ACT English section, 5 passages, 75 questions, 45 minutes. It's about 2 questions a minute, so you got to move. Typical passage. Items are underlined. You have to determine if they're correct or not. You're given usually no change and 3 alternatives. Let's try no change here. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet, tide table charts covering the refrigerator door, and it goes on. That sounded okay. Let's try B. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. And they sound identical, don't they? What's the difference? In many of these cases, punctuation is the difference, but I didn't read it like that. I blasted right through the comma. Also, you notice that eyes jump back and forth from left to right, and we lose our place. Therefore, the first 2 rules in reading the English section. Number 1, because our eyes bounce back and forth, we lose our place. What I found works very well with me is to cover the entire question, that is, everything underlined, with the fingers of my left hand. That way my eyes don't see it, but they see the possible answer that I'm reading. I place the fingers of my right hand underneath the choice that I'm reading, so that my eyes only focus on it. Secondly, punctuation is huge in the English section. To make sure you don't blast right through it, we read with incredibly exaggerated pause. The wrong answers just jump out at you. Let's try it. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. Tide table charts covering the refrigerator door. That sounded good. Let's try B. Pretend the shaded area is the fingers of my left hand, entirely covering that. I don't want my eyes to see any of that. My right fingers are right underneath selection B. All I want to see is, when my eyes dart that way, is B. So let's read this. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Obviously wrong. We don't even have to continue. Let's try C. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door. Hip waders hanging in the closet. That sounded pretty good. Sounded like no change, in fact. Let's try D. I grew up with buckets, shovels, and nets waiting by the back door, hip waders hanging in the closet. See, I blasted right through it because there was no punctuation. And I see that it's obviously not right. So I'm stuck between A and C. This is a lesson for down the road. It's one of those 2. It's not 50-50. It is one of those 2. Though they read exactly the same. What else can we look at? Well, I see all the clauses are separated by semicolons. Though C read correctly, it's separated by a comma. Therefore, question 1, I would answer 1. Use your left hand to cover the question. Use your right hand to make sure your eyes only focus on the item that you're reading. Punctuation is read with dramatic pause. Moving on, many of the questions are very short. Question 3 is kind of short. That one we just read is somewhat short. Number 5 is somewhat short. We see also that as we read these, we can really read many of them just by themselves. I could, for example, starting with number 5, I could start with the word everything. Everything was subservient to the disposal of the tides. I don't have to know a whole lot about the story. And I can answer 5. 4, on the other hand, is a long question. And most long questions require that you know something about the story. Well, I just said that with these short questions, we're not even focused on the story. Therefore, it's wasted time to try to answer 4 immediately, because it requires us to go back and read for content when we really have been reading to correct questions. Therefore, the third rule, because we're focusing on the grammar of the short questions, We answer all the short questions. A long question comes along, skip it. That doesn't mean don't answer it. But when you're done, come back then and read. As you read, check that your answers that you've already answered are correct, they make sense. But as you read, now you attempt to gain understanding of the story. So those long questions then become answerable. So 3 rules. Your eyes bounce back and forth. Use your fingers to isolate the question and the answer. Punctuation is an issue. Dramatic pause. Long questions, skip them. Come back at the end. That's English in a nutshell. We shall do a lot more, though.